So with that in mind, you're probably thinking that, in a sense, an overhaul of our economic development program, to be sure it has a purpose and a mission, and then it's very clear how they follow through on that. And then probably the most critical area, which is the area that I've been working on, is, and you've hit on the term, effectiveness. How do we evaluate the effectiveness of an economic program, these incentives, if the legislators who have, by the Constitution, the fiduciary responsibility to make those decisions based on data, and yet they can't get the data, they can't access the factual information. They're just looking at press releases and going back from that. If we can't get the data from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation in a timely fashion and ensure that it's up to date and accurate, you're kind of blind.
Yes, you would be. And one of the findings of our study is that for many of these there's no data, zero. For some of them there is information, but often that's contaminated by the self-interest of the reporting entity. For example, the film credit is a classic example. We have a film credit that's designed to subsidize the operations of a particular kind of entity that is promoted by a state agency. Who reports on the effectiveness of that incentive? The very same state agency whose livelihood to some degree depends on the perceived success of this program. That's not to say anyone in the film office is making numbers up or is dishonest. We don't say anything like that and don't believe that to be true. But when you have people that receive money who have an incentive to say they're going to create jobs, and you have people that are giving the money or are administering a program who have an incentive for the program to continue, you can't expect a really independent or objective assessment of the effectiveness of that program. So one of the things we've tried to do, and it's not easy, but we're trying, particularly with the research we're doing now, is assess for at least a good number of these programs, is there any evidence of effectiveness? Do we have any reason to believe that we would have more jobs with this kind of program than we would have if we just use the money either to reduce taxes for everyone or to increase spending in government services or support existing services in a manner that's more effective?
Well, your research and analysis allowed you to really evaluate which programs, incentives, tend to have high, moderate, or low effectiveness. Let's start out, because you mentioned the film credit. We all believe that Michigan has energized itself with attracting Hollywood producers to come to this state. The issue, though, is cost, and then cost benefit. How much is really being returned to the state for the cost of the incentive provided? Next year, it's predicted by the Senate Fiscal Agency to be upwards of $150 million directly out of the general fund, even if after you subtract any of the quote-unquote economic activity, like going to restaurants or hotel stays, other activities that would be generated by a film production here in the state. Tell us how you arrived at the film credit being rated as low effective overall in an economic development program that is really, its aim is to create permanent jobs and a source of return revenue for the initial cost of the incentive coming out or subsidized by all our taxpayers.
This was a job that we spent a lot of time on thinking it through, and at least as of the first study, we looked out to see what data was available. And of course there's very little data on these, and what there is, as I said, is contaminated by self-interested reporting and administration. But if you think about the economy of the state of Michigan, you ask yourself, what are we good at? And you can pick up a study that we do, for example, for Automation Alley, which covers Oakland County, Livingston County, Genesee County, Washtenaw, Wayne County, Monroe. It identifies things that we are really good at in Michigan, things we can be proud of. It's not just building cars, it's chemicals, manufacturing, it's defense, it's electronics, where we're better than almost anybody in the world. And guess what? In those areas, we have high-wage jobs that we largely sustain without government subsidies because we're good at it. Then you think about the film industry. Are we good at that? Well, I think we could be good at it, but there's nothing that right now that gives us a comparative advantage. Why would you do it here versus Missouri or Ohio or California? If you want to shoot beautiful lakes, if you want to shoot forests, if you want to shoot film with Detroit or Flint or some other particular place, you want to see the Mackinac Bridge, you got to come to Michigan. Okay, but if you want to shoot somewhere in time again with the horses, you need to go to Mackinac Island.
Right.
For that, we're good at, but there's nothing in terms of a comparative advantage that indicates that we will outcompete on a sustained basis other states for film jobs, especially when we're not talking about commercials, which is the one area where we do a lot of it.
Right.
All right, particularly for auto industry. You compare that with manufacturing. We've been a manufacturing powerhouse for 100 years. And we can continue to do that, and you see our manufacturers out there now are surviving paying higher taxes and higher wages and a government that's sometimes, state government that's sometimes not helping that much. If we can survive that, we can do pretty well in manufacturing. High wage, high technology. Life sciences, again, we're good at that. We have a reason for people to come here without a subsidy. What I see and what our team saw when we looked at the film credit was all the evidence suggests that people are coming here so that we can pay their wages, right? And if you pay somebody enough of their costs, they'll come here. And what we've done with the film credit is we've actually proven the kind of economist question, if you pay somebody enough, will they eventually come and do something in your state? And we found out how much you need to pay. And I'm sitting here now, you and I are sitting here. We have yet to have one installation that is permanently here with permanent jobs because of this. And for $100 million, we deserve more than that.
And that is certainly under review right now. Keep the incentive, but cap it responsibly, because we're cutting other areas of the budget, essential services, kids in school, fire and police locally, Medicaid costs to seniors and so on. So when you get into that, and then you say, but we have to keep this high rate of giving to one industry, a film industry, it causes you to perhaps evaluate that.
Yeah.
That's currently going on. But give us an example of an incentive that seems to have a high rate of return. It tends to be a good investment. It's effective. Which one?
We identified the PA 198, the abatement for industrial property, as effective. And the reason we identified it as effective are multiple. Number one, we're good at manufacturing. We have a reason to believe that people will locate here and keep locating here and pay good wages and pay taxes and employ people who buy houses and go to schools and do all the wonderful things we want to do here in Michigan. And we have 100+ years of evidence that they will do that. All right? But we have a problem. We have a cost disadvantage because our property taxes are high in Michigan and other taxes are high, particularly the, as you know, the hated personal property tax that taxes, for example, if this wasn't on state property, we'd be taxing this chair, we'd be taxing this table, we'd be taxing the camera, we'd be taxing the computer that isn't even working in the corner over there.
That's true.
As if we bought it last year and it was still working. And that's a cost disadvantage. So what Michigan has available to local units of government is an ability to abate 50% of the property taxes for that industrial property. And in fact, that is done almost universally in the state. Not everywhere. In fact, there are a few communities like Troy that have been historically very reluctant to do that, and that's their choice. But almost everywhere in Michigan, we will abate 50% of the property tax for a manufacturer. That allows us to be cost competitive, at least on taxes. It's proven to work. All you have to do is drive anywhere around in southeastern Michigan or here in Lansing or out in Grand Rapids or in Flint or in Midland or even in places like Traverse City, and you see that it's working because almost all those industrial facilities have those abatements, and there are real jobs there. That we consider to be effective.